Hello everyone, Ceri Griffiths here, or some of you know me, Ceri the Crafter, and welcome to Coffee with Ceri. Now, anyone who's not seen one of these before, this is just me putting my point of view on a subject that's maybe crossed my path or crossed my mind. I'm not here to be objectionable, I'm not here to be opinionated, I'm not here to cause a ruckus, pick a fight. I'm trying to put both sides of a story or something that's crossed my path. And I don't really watch the news, I don't really read newspapers, so what I've seen or heard is usually from social media, but my aim is to basically start a conversation, maybe raise a topic you weren't aware of. So here's me, cup of coffee. That's nice. So the topic today, now, as a lot of you may be aware, mind you, there's bound to be lots who aren't, I used to be a professional performer. I was a professional dancer. I did sing. I was hired to sing occasionally. Not my favourite thing to do. I don't believe I have a great voice, but I was hired to sing, and I did act in my career as a performer. I'll go into more about that in a future one anyway. Maybe I'll do one about my journey as a dancer, singer, actor, all the way through. However, in the era that I sort of started working as a dancer, which was about 1989, 1990, I did a few land things, and then my agent actually contacted me and said, Ceri, can you be in Miami tomorrow? There's a cruise ship company who has a dancer who's got injured and they need someone as soon as possible. Can you get to Miami? We'll send you tickets. So before I knew it, I was on a plane to America, and the first time I'd been to America, I was very happy at that. I had this vision of really wanting to be in America. So then I joined a cruise ship company. It was Carnival Cruises at the time, and I did one contract with them. And then when I came back to this country, I very quickly became aware of a whole stigma that goes around cruise ship dancers. And I just want to throw that into a bit of perspective. Fingers crossed it's changed. I'm hoping it's changed, because I retired. When did I retire? 20 years ago. I can't work that out. 2003, I think it was. Yeah, 2003, 20 years ago, and small change. So what I found out when I came back and started auditioning for other shows and television, film and video and all of that malarkey was that the moment you said you'd done a cruise ship contract or you'd been a cruise ship dancer, all of a sudden they were like, oh, really? And I was taken aback, because the experience I had had working as a cruise ship dancer was very, very educational. And I found that with people working, say, in the West End here in London or on Broadway or a lot of the major show companies, there was sort of an air of snobbery about their jobs, and yet they would look down on cruise ship dancers. And then about a year later, blah, 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 I'd done other things. I think there's some television work. I'd done some touring of Britain with a few stars. And Princess Cruises were holding auditions at Pineapple in London. Now, the thing is that there are lots of people in the world whose dream it is to be a dancer, a singer, an actor, an all-rounder, all of that. But if this is the amount of people there are, this is the amount of jobs there are. So I'd been auditioning quite steadily. I'd got things like television advertisements. I'd got a small part in a movie, done a couple of small TV things, but nothing that was a major earner. And trying to break into the West End circuit was hard, because to get into the West End, not only did you have to have talent, which everyone at the auditions had talent, you had to have experience, or you had to know someone, or you had to be a triple threat, meaning you could sing, act and dance superbly. And it used to be quite a tight clique, and to get in, you pretty much had to know someone. Yeah, let's just leave it as know someone. So Princess Cruises was holding auditions in Pineapple in London, And I went along, and I can't tell you how many people were at that audition. It was what I would call a cattle call. Now, back in 1989, 1990, 1991, that sort of era, there were lots of girl dancers, but not a huge amount of boy dancers. And boy dancers, I can't say were guaranteed a job, but if you could move in time to music, you were relatively tall, and you had a modicum of flexibility, you could act a bit and you could sing a bit, and looks had something to do with it as well, then you could put your money on maybe getting a job. So I thought, you know what, I've been on this audition cycle for a while. I want to get out there. I want to get some experience under my belt. I want to go and do a contract, come back, see a bit of the world, because obviously I didn't have a lot of money, but working on a cruise ship would show me the world. And actually I'll do a coffee with Ceri in the future on that too, what it's like to work on a cruise ship, because I think that maybe things in that vicinity has changed as well. But I think people are very unaware of what goes on cruise ships, so maybe that's another coffee with Ceri. Anyway, so I got the audition. I got chosen to be part of a team. It was a brand new team that was being put together, which was going to be called a dancer only team. Up until that point, cruise ship dancers had to do other duties like call bingo, host deck games, host parties, did I say call bingo? There was a lot of calling bingo. Hosting shows, doing the social aspect of things, mixing a middle at cocktail parties, doing hobbies and crafts, as well as performing. Let's see, how often you perform? Probably about five nights out of 7 you would be performing, and every evening of that you did 2 shows. And then you go to bed at gone midnight, you get up early in the morning because it was disembarkation. You had to be up by 6 o'clock in the morning on the gangway, ready for disembarkation, or you get it. We'll go into more of that later. Anyway, but we were the dancer onlys. We were the first contract that Princess was taking on that were dancer onlys. And we were launching, or going to be the launch team. We weren't the first team on the Crown Princess, but we were the launch team, as in the Crown Princess, which was their newest ship at the time, had been cruising a few test cruises around Europe and crossed over to New York. And then that test team had been taken off, and then the Crown Princess was being christened in New York by Sophia Loren, and we were the team that was on board doing all of the major shows, and we were what called first team. Although we weren't the first team, but we were the first official team. So we were all flown out to New York, got onto the ship, and then just worked ourselves to death. However, on a ship, the amount you do as a dancer only compared to what a West End or a Broadway dancer would do is different. Now, I have quite a few friends who are working in the West End. I've got 1 or 2 friends who've worked on Broadway. And you basically, once you actually get the job, which is the biggest hurdle to get over, when you get the job, it's like any other job. You learn the score, you learn the lyrics, you learn the choreography in a rehearsal space, and then you go to the staged area, and then it's all staged, or you replace the existing cast. But basically, when you're on Broadway or the West End, you're doing 8 shows a week for a year, the length of your contract. However, it's the same show you do every single performance. Now, there may be the odd spin-off, like you have to do a promotional for the show on a TV special or something, but you're tied to that show for the length of your contract, and you're actually dancing the same show, singing the same lyrics, doing the same staging, the lighting is identical. So basically, you are delivering the same product every single show. The only thing that would change would be maybe a bit of your personality or your energy or your exuberance, and that is usually fed by the audience. However, when you're a cruise ship dancer, it's slightly different. So we went into rehearsals in Putney Bridge before we flew out to New York, and we learned 5 one-hour shows. I think we were in rehearsals maybe 3 weeks. So we learned 5 one-hour shows, completely, lyrics, everything. Luckily enough, at that time we were lip syncing, although that changed within one contract. We ended up singing live. We were fake tap dancing to start with, but then when they found out most of us could tap, they took the click track off and we were tapping live. So anyway, so we learned our 5 shows, flew out to New York, went straight to the cruise ship, got on board, and then at night while everyone was asleep, we were in rehearsals on stage doing blocking, which is laying out the show on the stage so that it makes sense, so the lighting works, the set scenery changes, had to rehearse all costume changes, all costume fittings were done. So we had five shows. So we did the launch, everything went fine. However, within about, I'd say probably about 3 months of our 6-month contract, we then had teachers come on board to teach us a couple of new shows. So we would be performing 5 nights a week, 2 shows each night. Once we'd finished the show, the lounge would be emptied, we'd go down, have a quick bite to eat, get changed, go back up to the show lounge. Probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, we would start learning new shows, learning new choreography. And we'd probably have about 2 weeks to learn a show. And then it would be premiered, and then one of the shows we were already doing would be retired. So to retire a show, you had to make sure all your costumes were in good condition. You had to do your own costume repairs, everything like that. It was all laundered, packed up, taken off the ship. And then in those 2 weeks that you'd be learning a show, you would have seamstresses on board, so all the costume fittings would be in there. The lead singers would be there with you, learning all new lyrics and songs. The orchestra would be with you. So you can imagine there's a lot of work. So when you compare, if you're the West End or Broadway and you're doing 8 shows a week, and it's the same show for the length of your contract, compared to a cruise ship dancer who has to do everything from sing, dance, act. Sometimes you were like the magician's assistant. Sometimes you're actually part of like a Cirque du Soleil show. So you had to learn certain techniques, which aerial work. Who knew you had to do aerial work? I mean, some of our girls had never been in a harness and never been up in the air and doing aerial work. You had to learn it. And there was no, oh, get someone else to do it. You were the only dancers. So the tutors actually had to break you up to find out who had the appropriate skills to get you into the right tracks so we could all do the shows. And then, of course, at the end of the 6-month contract, there was usually a 1 week or a 2 week handover with a new team. So a new team would come on the ship and you would perform a show, and then that night you would retire the show, as in you personally would get everything ready, set up, so that then it could be handed over to the new dancers who a week later would perform that show while you were still on board. And that would happen. So this big, massive handover of costumes and rehearsals, and basically you didn't see daylight. You were lucky if you got to eat, because as it happened on one of my contracts, the new dancers came on board, and part of the way through the second week, one of their male dancers got injured. I happened to be the line captain at the time. Line captain, dance captain is basically someone who rehearses the shows, gives feedback to the dancers, performs in the shows, makes sure, basically is the manager of the dance team. And this guy had got injured. So it was a case of, right, Ceri, you're on. So I then had to go back into the show, but the track being, say I'm boy 1 at the beginning of the show, I would be boy 1 at the end of the show, and that boy 1 did certain parts all the way through the shows. But that pathway through the shows was set up by the tutors according to your technique and skills and abilities. So of course I then jumped in to do track 1, and it wasn't the same track as mine. So I then had to, before the show, learn to adjust to other. You had to be versatile. On land, it's called a swing. I think some ships now have what's called a swing as well, which means there's one male and one female dancer who usually learns everybody's parts. So if someone goes down, gets injured, gets sick, gets fired, or whatever it is, then that person at the drop of a hat can jump in and do it. And that goes on Broadway and West End, in that, say the lead of the show is ill, the show doesn't stop, the cover or the swing goes into their place. So at the end of the contract, then, what you need to do is, oh, sorry, saying my eye. At the end of the contract, of course, you are then flown home, or you're flown to the next ship, or you're flown to the studio to learn a new batch of shows. Now, because I didn't have any major family ties and I was quite willing to be versatile, a lot of the time I would be gone from home for 12 to 18 months without returning, because what they would do is, once my contract finished, before it had even finished, they would be offering the dancers further contracts, because obviously they don't want to invest all of this time and effort into a dancer only to lose them. So basically, I, as a line captain, and even before I became a line captain as a dancer, I used to keep notes on all of the shows. So I'd have all of the backing tracks on the CD, as it was then, and actually before that was even a cassette recorder. I'd have all of the scripts and the lyrics, because very often I would get off a ship, say in Miami, get onto a plane, fly across America, and be at San Pedro in near Los Angeles, get onto another ship and be performing that night. So on the plane, I'd have my Walkman on, and I'd be trying to learn lyrics if it was a different show to what I'd normally do. And then I'd get to the ship as quickly as I could. The line captain of that ship would then have all the cast in, and while passengers were enjoying boarding and all that, the doors would be shut and I would be learning a show. And off it would go. Or I would fly to Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is where our studio was, just a bit close to West Hollywood. And I'd be there for maybe 2 months learning a whole different batch of shows with a different batch of dancers. Then we would then be shipped out to a different ship, and then you go. So basically it's this whole cycle. So whereas West End and Broadway dancers have the luxury of doing the same show continually, unless of course there's new numbers added to the show, or choreography is adjusted, or it's a show that trends by following certain pop icons, or you get what I mean. Whereas cruise ship dancers, the versatility and strength you have to do cruise ship work to keep on changing and retaining all of the different knowledge that you accrue is huge. But still, there was this stigma in the world of professional dance. So, oh, you're a cruise ship dancer, yes. And I'm like, what? However, I must admit, hand on heart, I have had a few friends who were on the cruise ships with me. I mean, even back in 1989, in fact, Gavin's the one that pops in mind. My Ceri did it as well. Not me, Ceri, another Ceri. He went on and he did West End. He was in Ghostbusters, the movie. He had a speaking acting part. He then went into Beauty and Beast. He was performing at the Tony Awards. He's won awards. He's got a huge career now. And you know, he was a cruise ship dancer. And there's many more tales like that out there. So the one thing it did give me, though, is when I did eventually retire, I was working on cruise ships for 14 years. When I did come back, I had such a plethora of knowledge and skills that you could pretty much have nailed most things. But I did tend to keep it quite quiet that I was a cruise ship dancer, purely because it was something, it was weird. The moment you said cruise ship dancer, the blinkers went on, the screens went down, and you were, I don't want to say dismissed, but you just weren't taken seriously. And I think that was part of ignorance on behalf of maybe choreographers and directors who had never worked at sea, had no idea. They just thought that when you're a cruise ship dancer, you call bingo and did a bit of step touch and you lip sync to something. I can absolutely assure you, I mean, when we were working on Princess, I was working with Broadway choreographers. I mean, we had Bob Mackey's team on board to do costumes with us. We were doing full Las Vegas shows. We were doing Cats, sorry, an abbreviated version of Cats. Phantom of the Opera, Oklahoma. There's just so many different shows I did. Evita, that's another one. And we 42nd Street. I was a lead in 42nd Street, so there you go. That's shows I can sing and dance and act. But it's just interesting, and I'm hoping, because I'm out of the entertainment world now. I retired, as I said, in 2003, 2004, and I basically, when I was done, I was done. And I decided to retire because I was still dancing at almost 44 years old. I was like 43 years old and 9 months or something, small change. And I decided that I would look round at the cast, and the cast sometimes were half my age. And I was like, you know what, it's time for me to walk away before I get majorly injured. And I did have a few injuries, but then when you're dancing on a moving stage, literally a moving stage in a storm, you do get injured, you do pull muscles, but it's a great training ground for people who are new to the industry to hone their theatre skills to come out the other end. So anyway, so next time you're on a cruise ship, if you're the cruising sort, look at those dancers and actually think what they are doing, what they're able to do, and how many shows they do a week. Some shipping, some ship, I can't speak. There are cruise companies out there where you still have dancer crew staff or crew staff dancer, which means that they will still do the shows at night, but in the day they will be doing activities. That doesn't lessen their talent anymore. It means that the company is trying to get as much value out of having a body on board to, instead of paying a dancer and paying a crew staff member, the dancers don't work in the day except for rehearsals. So why not ask the crew staff and the dancers to amalgamate into one thing? And they do, and lots of cruise ships do that. Although there are lots of cruise ships out there now where maybe you'll find that the dancers are actually the aerobic instructors or the dance instructors, or they're the physical fitness instructors, things like that. So anyway, just sort of wanted to pop in and talk about that, because I must admit, when I was working on the ships and I came home, it really, really annoyed me that people look down on the industry of cruise ships. And at the time when the Crown Princess was launched, it was the biggest ship in the world. Like that's the size of it. However, if you look at the Crown Princess now, actually the Crown Princess has not been scrapped, but it was sold many years ago, and then it went to another company, and I don't even know whether it's still, it may have been sold for scrap by now, because we're talking 30 odd years now. But the size of that ship, you could probably put it 3 or 4 times into some of the mega cruise ships are out there now. And it's amazing, it is amazing, but a ship is a city at sea. And as with most cities, they have a theatre. And in the theatre, you expect to see high quality professional performances. You will see that on a cruise ship. And as I said, I'm hoping to goodness that the attitude towards cruise ship dancers has changed, because it needs to. Those guys and girls are out there working just as hard as anyone. What they don't have is they don't have a home to go home to after a show. They have a cabin. They're earning wages just like anyone else is earning wages. They're putting their time and their efforts into what they do to produce and deliver the best quality product they can. It is a stepping stone. Cruise ship work is a stepping stone, unless cruise ship work actually suits you. Like, as I said, I was at sea for 14 years, not continually, by the way. I took some breaks in between, and cruise ship life actually worked for me. I get bored very easily. I think if I'd have, I mean, don't get wrong, I did working in London. I performed in London, not the West End. I did My Fair Lady at Sadler's Wells, and I did a few other venues as well. However, I think if I'd have got 8 shows a week in the West End, I would have been bored out of my brains. I loved the challenge of being at sea and the fact that I got so many different skills. Like when I went to sea, I couldn't tap dance. However, by the time I left the ships, I'd done several Jean Castle was a Broadway choreographer, tap routines. I had learnt to tap. I'd learnt to do ballroom skills. I'd honed my singing skills. I'd honed my acting skills. I'd done some Cirque du Soleil work. I mean, goodness knows, I'd done magic stuff. Stuff I probably would never have done other than that. So anyway, enough of me gossiping. As I said, I will try and do one of these coffee with Ceris. It won't be next month. Maybe it'll be the month after. I need to look at the schedule. I'll do one about working on cruise ships. And then maybe later in the year, I'll do one about my journey as a dancer, because I started dancing extremely late. I mean, I took my first dance class at 25. Most people start at about 10 or 12. So I got there. Sheer determination, guts, got there. So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye to you now, and hopefully you enjoyed that, and speak again soon. Bye-bye now.